Hey Covalence friends. So chances are you have some functions or some utilities that you have to repetitively call in your day-to-day workflow. And wouldn't it be nice to kind of help augment that and automate it a little bit? And you can in this cross-platform manner. So what we're going to be using today is the either zsh, the Z shell, or zsh RC file, or for the bash equivalent, if bash is your default shell, the bashrc file. Now, if you've never heard of these, you might still actually have them on your computer. So, if you're using Linux, you probably know what these files are and have utilized them. So, if you're using zsh or bash, we'll be using, the zshrc file here today, but if you're using bash, bashrc is also available. If you're using Mac OS, if you've updated within the last few years, your terminal is actually running the Z shell by default. And if you have a slightly older version of Mac OS that you haven't updated, it's likely running bash as its default shell. So you will also have a bashrc or zshrc file in your home directory. And if you're using Windows, you can actually also do this if you have the Windows subsystem for Linux installed. So whatever distro of choice that you have currently on your system, it will likely have bash installed and therefore have the bashrc file. So what is the bashrc file? Well, it's a series of configs that execute upon login and anytime your shell is opened. So what we'll be doing here is just adding some functionality in there, and it's mostly just some like system-wide setup, but let's go ahead and open mine so y'all can see what we have defined in there. So also, since we're going to be working with these little config files, you might not always be working on them on your desktop. You might actually be like using SSH to connect to a server, and you might not always have a graphical environment. So it's for that reason I'm actually going to use a command line text editor here. And there are many of them, and I'm not going to incite a holy war in the comments, but you have Vi, Vim, Emacs, Nano, and a handful of others. I'm going to use Nano here just because it's very beginner friendly, and I like it quite a lot. So I'm currently in my home directory, but if I weren't, you can use the tilde and then the / in both bash and the Z shell as a shortcut for your home directory. So I'm going to edit my zshrc file. And in here, I've got a couple of scripts that auto-delete some of my classes or lab reviews for students because I record a lot of video on a daily basis, and it accrues very, very quickly. So if I did not have this automatic management, I would run out of space very quickly. We have some path variables set up. I have ohmyzsh, which is a really cool shell extension, and I would wager at least half of this file is just their setup. We have some aliases here, which are basically like small commands that you can alias out as additional commands. And then we have functions, which extend upon that a little bit. And so the syntax of these functions are declaring them via the name function, and then the name of the function, and then some parentheses, and then some curly braces, which you don't have to necessarily declare functions in that exact way, but it's very easily readable, and regardless of what language you primarily use in your day-to-day operations, it looks pretty similar. Now, there is one little difference, and that is for these functions, I pass in a bunch of arguments when I use it, but we don't see any like parameters in the parentheses, and that's because we use these $ numerical like delimiters here. So if I say like, let's see, I have this function to get standard lines of code in a directory. So I have to say like the directory and the type of extension to look for. But we don't have those two things here. So I would say like slock and then source/pizza and then .js, and my typical variable naming conventions. And how do we get those interpreted in the function? Well, $1, $2. So, two of the functions that I want to write today are an abstraction layer upon create React app that does a little bit more than what the standard create React app command does. And I also want to create a full stack boilerplate application based off of Covalence's own boilerplate application, which we have a public repo for that, and I can link that in the comments. So let's go ahead and without further ado start writing that create React app wrapper first. And so what I want to call this is, I'll call it CRA, and we'll leave it at that. And so the sample usage of this is going to be like CRA some project name. And what I want this to do is, well, with create React app, wherever you initialize it is wherever it executes. And maybe I'm not scoped into the directory that I think I am, so I would like this to actually just dump me into my demo folder regardless of where I currently am. So we can do that. So no matter what, I am now CD'd right into my demo folder, which is nice. And then we can execute npx create React app, and then the name of the project. So I said it was the first argument after the command in the execution of this, and so we use the $1 delimiter there. And so whatever I pass in, some project name, it executes npx create React app, some project name. I'm also going to add in the Typescript template as well, just because it makes everything nicer. That's the cool part about writing these custom scripts, is you just say CRA some project name and it takes care of all of that for you. So I know it might take an extra couple of minutes to define this function, but if it's something you reuse a lot, you will save yourself a ton of time in the long run. And even if you lose time doing this, we're programmers. We'd rather spend, 5 hours automating like a 2-minute task that we do like monthly, and that we might never, see a time benefit over our lifetimes. It's just what we do. But after that, create React app by default just executes the creation script. It doesn't actually put you into that directory, so we can actually change directories into the one that was just created for us. And we can also go ahead and, whoops, I went too far down. You can open up VS Code, and while we're at it, we can even have this install additional arguments if we want, or additional modules. So let's say I wanted to use React Router DOM, which is not at all too terribly uncommon for a lot of the create React apps I make. So you can have it do that for you. So we cd into the demo folder, create the React app with TypeScript, we cd into that projects folder, open up VS Code automatically, and we also install some additional packages. I don't know, that seems like a pretty solid setup in my opinion. And now let's go look at getting the boilerplate set up. Alright, so the Covalence boilerplate is a full stack React, TypeScript, and Express Node TypeScript project on the back end. That's just kind of a nice little mono project, and I use that a lot as a basis for full stack projects. And so I'm going to create a custom function called full stack based upon that. Alright, and so kind of like the above, what I actually want to do is cd into my demo folder regardless of where I currently am. Then I need to clone this Git repo from Covalence, And the repo URL is barebones React Typescript Express. And I have the SSH URL, but I can post the HTTPS URL in the YouTube description, and that way you can click on the link and look over it. So if you just run git clone by itself, it's going to clone the project with whatever the directory name is itself, whatever the repo name is, and we don't want that. We want to be able to say like full stack, spaghetti, and have it clone it with our own directory name. So there we go. We'll just do that. And we'll do as we did above, which is just cd into that directory once it's defined and created. And then I've got some git management I need to do. So I actually have read and write permissions to this repository. And on accident before, I have done like a little weekend project where I did a small little styling change that broke functionality of the boilerplate for everyone. And then one Monday morning, the student was like, "Hey, Andrew, did you mean to update the boilerplate?" And I was like, "No, I didn't update the boilerplate." And I was like, "Oh no." So if I already had a repo created, I could just change the remote URL, but usually speaking, I just kill the directory anyway. So the git directory, that is, and reinitialize it. One thing you could do with this custom function is you could actually communicate to GitHub's API to create your own remote repo, which would be a really cool application of this. So like if they had like api.github.com/create/your username, they had some parameter for like your username and your repo name and some like API key, you could make just like a curl request to go ahead and send that data and get all of that created, which, that would be really, really cool. And then instead of necessarily, like deleting the Git repo, which like, it's just our updates to it. It's completely independent from your project. You probably would want to maybe clear out previous commits anyway. Regardless of what you choose to do with the Git directory, you can, remotely create that URL. And then after this, you could say like git remote set URL to, your GitHub user profile /$1. So that would be a really, really cool application. That would make this video probably twice the length, so I'll leave that out. But, we get some cool implications from being able to programmatically, execute all of these commands. So for now, we'll keep it pretty simple. And after reinitializing it, we'll also open up VS Code, and we will also go ahead and install some of our packages that we commonly use. So this is a full stack application, so I'll add in some client-side libraries. And maybe some back-end packages as well. I'm going to be working with, some databases, usually speaking, so I might be using .env for credential management. Might add in MySQL. Let's see, JSON Web Token. Bcrypt. I cannot type for the life of me today. There we go. Okay. So, I think that's kind of about what I want for the time being. Let's actually go test these out. So, in order to save, this is why I like Nano and suggest it as a good beginner-friendly one. It's because it has the commands down here, so you don't really need like a reference sheet And if you're like SSH into a server somewhere, you don't have to like go, you know, break visual focus to go to your host device and pull up the internet browser if your instance that you're, you know, connected to has the commands down below. So the caret symbol just designates control as a key. So if I want to save my changes, if I want to write them out to this file, we can hit Control O, or we can hit Control X to exit and save it along the way. I don't know why, but out of habit, I always just save first, then exit. So save, hit enter, Control X, we're exited. Now these aren't going to be recognized yet because, like I said, this file, that config file, only runs on login and upon opening a new terminal. So I could actually open a new terminal here and they would be ready. However, we can do another thing, which is the source command, or a shortcut for the source command, which basically does a reload. And so you can use just a dot as a singular placeholder. And now if I type out CR, we get all of these auto completion you know, help for us. So we've got some general cryptography and like security packages installed by default, and then we have our CRA command here. So I am in my home directory, not in my demo folder, but if I make a directory called React Lamau, here we say it's creating a React app and home Andrew demo React Lamau. So it CD'd me over into my demo folder and then started creating it. And create React app, it does take a minute or two to instantiate. So while it's doing this in the background, what I'm going to do is open up a new tab here. And we're going to do the same thing with full stack. And you know what I'll do is I'm already in my demo folder here, but I'll go out of it. If I type out full and hit tab to autocomplete, you know, stack comes up. So that's a pretty safe assurance that, you know, your command is recognized. And I'll say full stack pizza. And so we just did a git clone, and it's going to be a lot faster than create React app. But oh, there's our create React app popping up. But for the full stack directory, you know, there we go. We've got all of our node modules installed now. We've got our full stack application here. Our package.json, it's pretty minimalist to start, but we also have the libraries that I installed myself. So bcrypt, JSON Web Token, MySQL, React Router DOM, or at least types to them, bcrypt, MySQL, JSON Web Token, etc. Those don't come installed by default. So that was our script adding that for us, which is nice because I don't have to think and remember like, what do I usually install? And you know, I did install JSON Web Token and bcrypt, but what if I were using some kind of library like Passport? That's actually at least like 6 modules I would need to install. The core Passport module and its types, and then Passport JWT and its types, and then Passport Local Strategy and its types. So that would be at least 6 more. And you know what? I don't ever have to remember those if I put them all in that script. So that's one of the beautiful benefits of doing this, is all of that tedious repeat behavior you don't really have to care about. And for the React app itself, let's see. We have a React TypeScript project instantiated for us, and you know, I know that we did use the TypeScript template, but the TypeScript template does not come with React Router DOM installed. However, we did explicitly have that as an extra command. So now if you wanted to have multiple views conditionally rendered, multiple routes with React Router DOM, then, you know, here we go. So that's kind of the beautiful part about creating these applications. these little functions is you can put in whatever opinions you want in there, and it really helps expedite your development workflow. So if you like this video, go ahead and click a like and subscribe, and if you have any comments you want to add about maybe potential future things you would like me to demonstrate, then please, let us know. I'd love to hear any feedback. Otherwise, I'll see y'all later.